Digital tools to drive peace and resilience in fragile settings. Moderating this session is Cynthia Mene, a social innovator and development finance expert. She currently leads one of IFC's largest donor-funded programs and brings deep experience from the agri-fintech and entrepreneurship space.
And then we also have Beverly Hacha Mbo. She is the Director of Policy at Development Gateway and IREX Venture. And as an international lawyer with over 10 years of experience in digitization, Beverly has led projects in 9 countries globally, and she leads oversight and policy positioning for the organization's agriculture portfolio, and also shaped key messaging across the DG in AI, in digital public infrastructure, and in health. But previously, Beverly worked at the World Bank Group as a legal consultant, and she's also on the board of Accountability Lab.
Great. I get to have my own one, I think. I'm going to be a typical lawyer for a second and answer a question with another question, which is there are 2 questions I think that we need to be asking when we're designing meaningfully and we're designing with young people and marginalized communities in mind. Is 1, what data do we really need to solve the problem? And 2, how can we model and mitigate any risks associated with that? And I start there because, and I have an example to back it up. A few years ago, Development Gateway built a dashboard for maternal and neonatal health. The idea being, if we can map where maternal and infant deaths are occurring in Ghana, then we can see where the deaths are highest and use that geolocated information to help policymakers target limited resources directed at improving service delivery. We knew going into it there was likely to be some highly sensitive data. So as part of, and we'll talk about this a bit more in the panel around partnerships, but we thought a lot around what can we do to minimize, how can we make sure there's a minimum amount of data available for policymakers to actually make an evidence-informed decision around improving service delivery, but how can we protect the most vulnerable? In that case, we used location fuzzing. So there's enough geographic specificity for policymakers to be able to see where the most deaths were taking place. But then it was not so precise that you could name down to the level of the house or the individual who was impacted. Sometimes I think we overcomplicate digital development, especially in resource-constrained environments. It's not rocket science. If we want to reach underserved communities, we need to meet them where they are. So yeah, I would leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Beverly. I would like to focus more on policy aspect. I know your work in terms of advancing like the framework for digital public infrastructure highlights the importance of interoperability and governance in DPI. Could you, based on your experience, tell us what policy levers have proven most effective for governments in establishing data governance standards that empower youth-led innovations either in health, in agriculture, extractive industries, and beyond? And building on that, also maybe share with us, how can youth voices be integrated into the development of digital policies that impact their future?
Great, thanks. Any more questions? No, I'm just kidding. just to lighten the mood. I think Sinead and Johan have set me up really well here, because I think the core of when we're thinking seriously about data governance is its complex systems at scale. So in Nigeria, Development Gateway, we've been working with the Ministry of Health around tobacco control and tobacco use impacts on youth. It's called DATA if you want to look it up. So we've set up 2 expert groups, one in survey implementation and the other in youth advisory. And we structured the program in this way because we'd learned in a pilot in DRC that we had one large expert group, and the youth voices and youth perspectives in that group kept getting lost. The expert group often went down some tangents that were quite highly technical, and we knew we were missing out on the insights we needed to shape the data use strategy for the program. And we knew if we were missing it, that our government partners were as well. So when we started up in Nigeria, we set it up in 2 structures so that there was a clear pathway in which we could repeatedly, recurrently receive and engage with youth perspectives on the data use strategy around how do we manage healthy outcomes for young Nigerians, and then setting the research priorities. So I share that example for two reasons. I think one, overarchingly, if we want to transform how we manage, store, and use data, aka data governance, then we've got to be very clear about how we translate insights into structure. It's great to collect lots of ideas and have space for that innovation, but it has to go somewhere. Otherwise, we spin our wheels and we'll burn people out. Young people have a lot of energy, bring a lot of energy and fresh perspective, but I don't want them to feel jaded that they're putting all these ideas out into the world and they're not translating into systemic change. So for me, for us, what that means is we need to move away from, oh yeah, there's a young person on this committee, to here's the outcome document of this drafting committee, and we can point in clear ways to show where a youth perspective or particular communities have been taken into account in X, Y, Z ways that now form the basis of that drafting strategy, that technical program, whatever it is. I think interoperability has three components, but we often get stuck on the first two. We talk a lot about data interoperability or data integration and connectedness. We talk about systems, maybe, if you're lucky, but we forget that it's fundamentally about people. And if we want digital infrastructures to expand upon the best of what humans have to offer, I think we need to be thinking in very tangible ways about how we transform the technical requirements, the policy committees, the oversight mechanisms, whatever the format is, and really think about how those venues, those avenues can espouse nuanced perspectives so that it's a feature to have nuanced perspectives and not a bug or an inconvenience.
Thank you. So you asked if there's any more questions. So I'm going to ask you one more question.
Excellent.
Can you tell us more about what partnership models have you found most effective?
So I thought about this question for a long time, probably longer than I needed to, right? Again, I did mention at the top of the hour, I'm a lawyer. I sit on things for a long time. And what I wanted to say on this topic, I think it's easy to throw out, we just need more public-private partnerships, or we just need X group of people in the room and that will fix everything. We're all looking for a silver bullet that is going to make these technologies and these approaches work. But what we actually need to be thinking about is partnership models as a constellation. In the same way that we need many stars simultaneously to see clearly at night, or clearer at night, we need to think about partnership models in the same way, especially when we're talking about inclusive digital public infrastructure. A model that DG is using in Ethiopia is engaging with universities outside of Addis to cascade a data standard around livestock, improving data and systems integration for livestock. Did you know that undergraduate and graduate students and their professors are some of the biggest users of livestock data in Ethiopia? I did not know this. Maybe you are not surprised. It was great for me to learn. But essentially, I learned from our embedded team that universities were often getting missed in a lot of these digital initiatives, these cascading and training opportunities, because they play an often informal role in translating contemporary and up-to-date research in real time in the communities where they lived and studied, and they weren't getting caught in the traditional value chain in terms of training and thinking about how we expand scale. And I think Sinead touched on this in her answer as well previously, but I think we really want digital public infrastructure and AI to be new, but I think there's a lot of power in considering these new and emerging tools on a continuum of digital transformation. And as part of that continuum, we have to talk about where we failed. We have to talk about where we have partnership blind spots. Which traditional and non-traditional partners are we not working with, but we should be? Are we thinking through where relationships are in communities and who people trust, and working with trusted partners to improve data use, to improve digital engagement, right? Are we working with imams and religious leaders? Are we working with trusted youth leaders to expand our idea of who should be in that model and how they drive scale and impact for digital initiatives? And lastly, I'll end on this point. I think it's really critical for DPI, for digital public infrastructure, to not get stuck at the payment and the ID level, divorced from services and experiences that all citizens, and especially young people, feel on a day-to-day basis. There's room for both. It doesn't have to be an either or. It can be both and. And we need to think about inclusive DPI, addressing power asymmetries not as an inconvenience, but as a necessity. We want technology to wish away the problems that we as humans have created, and it's not going to do that. But we can face that head on by using, DPI, whatever the next buzzword is going to be, as a new opportunity to restructure some of those partnership models and how they function.
Thank you very much. So just thank you very much. I have, so now I'm going to open it up to questions, but I have I'll take one question online from one of the online delegates. And this one says, what practical steps can youth-led initiatives take to build meaningful partnerships with global institutions like the World Bank, like Development Gateway, especially when working at a local level with limited resources and reach? I think Johan and Beverly could speak to this.
I think Johan covered most of it. So Development Gateway, I didn't mention this. We're a nonprofit. We are medium but mighty, small to medium but mighty, but we operate with the same approach and the same model. People who are living in those communities tend to know far more than we ever could, far more than I ever could sitting in Washington, D.C. I am Nigerian, but I don't live in Nigeria. And I pay attention to that positionality as much as I can, because there are always going to be people on ground who know better than I do. And my job is to help connect what they understand to other global conversations and resources as best as I can. So I think in terms of partnership, it's also about knowing your lane. And I think sometimes people are afraid to say that. So at DG, we're often a little bit further up the value chain, generally often working directly with governments on government systems at a systems level. And there aren't always avenues, because we have a very narrow scope, that we're building data governance or policy in particular ways. It's a fine balance that we do. We're building in particular ways with particular partners. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't work with youth groups or engage with young people, but there aren't always opportunities to, but sometimes there are. So I talked about that tobacco control program, and not because it's a youth focus, but because in general, it's about tobacco control, knowing that there are specific impacts on young people. So I think it goes a little bit to what Johan was saying, which is that you need to know where your strategy is or where your position is, and then build relationships accordingly. Talk to everybody. Talk to everybody up, down, and sideways. It's not only the people who sit on the stage, it's the people who are sitting next to you or people who are online with you in the chat, right? I think that's a part of how we build a more nuanced approach to partnerships, whether you're a part of a youth group or elsewhere.
Thank you. That's really exciting. Thank you all for listening to us, and thank you to our panelists for this session. We're excited to have you once more. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.